Alright, hello. Welcome. Today is a special video. I am going to start a talk, discussion, whatever you might call it, about spirituality, our spiritual existence, what it means, why it's confusing to people, different concepts and ideas, the part of religion, Eastern philosophy, Enlightenment, and particularly Christianity. So I hope you enjoy. Hope it goes well. I thought a little bit about it. It's something that's very central to my life and my experiences. And I basically, I have a lot to share. I think a lot of wisdom, experience. And I know this is something that's important for everyone. Because everyone is born agnostic. Agnostic meaning without, notice this root of knowledge, so without knowledge of just about anything, but without knowledge of the details of spiritual reality or God. We're just sort of born as animals, and either we're indoctrinated or we think we know the answers, or the answers are beyond us. We don't have access to them, with potential exceptions. But that's probably for another video. I think this, I don't know, maybe I'll get through it quickly, but I think it will take a few videos to really address. It's an evolving philosophy. But yeah, so a bit about my background, my spiritual or religious background. I was born into a very fundamentalist Protestant Christian family, and they do actually have a lot of power and influence in the Christian world, but I think I might save that talk for later as well. I basically, from the time I was born, this was the center of, it was just me and my mom most of the time, but it was the center of her life, my family's life, and forcibly the center of my life. So I was literally forced, exhaustion, sickness, doesn't matter, to go to church several times a week until I was on my own at college, for 18 years or so. it was just sort of a given. And like I know a lot of people experience that, but for me, like I think a lot of things in like my life just by happenstance. I would go to church with lots of other people, but most people are like relatively normal, like even in like a fairly like extremist environment like that. And my mom was like extremist fundamentalist, like ruling her life listening to Pat Robertson, like praying for the stoplight to change or to find her keys, or like anointing and blessing and spreading the word of Christ to everyone, and just obsession. And like as I mentioned in other videos, my mom has like some emotional disturbances that like compound this effect, I think. But experiencing that form of indoctrination, I feel like a lot of things were very obvious that aren't necessarily obvious even to the common churchgoer, or that they wouldn't question or see to question. Not that most people are that observant or questioning. But I always was, INFP, philosopher, natural spiritualist. And to me, like I remember like even being like 4 years old and being outside, and I loved nature and animals and innocence, and my mom really did instill an appreciation for that sort of love and helped to foster it in me, which is one of the things I'm absolutely the most grateful for. But I remember being outside and hanging from this tree. It's like this paradisical moment, like the Buddha, which I'll talk about later, from my childhood, of just pure blissful happiness. And knowing that, and questioning to myself, what is God? And having trouble like reckoning the rationale at this moment, but I remember thinking that that God is everything. God is everywhere. God is all of existence, and that it must be that way. If God exists, because you're told, like it's a fear-based conditioning. You have to believe in God. You have to accept Jesus into your heart. It's like it doesn't matter if you understand or you don't. Or you have reasons. You have to. You're gonna go to hell. But INFP, we like to understand before we accept things, and that's what Buddhism and Eastern philosophy teaches, which I think is much more correct. It is correct relative to Christianity and its dogmatic presentation. So yeah, like just like from early on, like from like toddler age, like I would think about like what these principles mean. And like I remember like when I was like 4, my mom used to say, well, like I love you so much, I hope that I die first. And like I got right away, and I didn't open my mouth until later, which is like typical INFP. But you know, like started to like get to me, and like one day I was like, hey, well, you know, yeah, like that's a selfless thing, but it's really a selfish thing, because you want me to be the one who suffers from the loss, not you. And I you know, I questioned selflessness and altruism in that way, and I remember like in a related like thought process, like coming to the conclusion that, you know, all true selflessness is ultimately selfish, because performing the selfish act, the moral act, the sacrifice, is accompanied by the intrinsic reward of having done the right thing, you know, having done something good. And I thought that was obvious, that you know, that's the real reward, not the material thing or the work or whatever, the pain, loss or absence of pain. But I think it's very clear, like maybe that comes naturally to more spiritual types like INFPs and some other types potentially. INFJs can be very selfish, and they're probably the most spiritual type. Maybe besides us, INFPs, but like we're very self-sacrificing and selfless, and yeah, and like from an INFP's perspective, you know, we don't really give a damn about anything besides like the intrinsic conscious spiritual existence, because like it seems obvious to us that that's all that matters. Like I do think that that's a deeper truth, but you know, most types are very secular. They care about facade, appearance, social standing, materialism, monetary wealth, things like that, which makes these very simple principles of morality and spirituality confusing to them. So I'm also having some coffee. I'm gonna go shopping after this. Yeah, so like the way I see things in general is that it's very simple, and there's a right way to be, there's righteousness, and there's corruption, evil. And I hear all these weird arguments from people who claim to be philosophers about the non-existence of good and evil, or like, you know, they want to like be smart about it. Like, but I don't really buy it. Like you know, like one of the other earlier ideas I formed was that, you know, there's positive, pure, good experience, and there's pain and suffering, harm, ill intent, maliciousness. And there's an absolute dichotomy between those, and that's tied to subjective conscious experience. You know, either it hurts. You know, it's like we don't have a scientific explanation for the difference between a positive feeling and a negative feeling, but we know that there's a very real existence of those things. And my mom would always emphasize purism. I mean, that's part of spirituality, part of religion, innocence, preservation of innocence. And I remember, like, from early on, she would very vehemently, actively protect me from, from any sort of exposure to evil or like the dark spiritual side, witchcraft, or negative things. She wanted to preserve my innocence. Like an animal is born innocent, a person is born innocent, and it can be lost. She knew that. She does understand some things. But the INFP, I knew that I was good in my nature. I didn't really fear the loss of innocence. I always expected myself to be strong enough not to lose it. But I was frustrated from early on that, I, as a natural truth seeker, was being censored from exposure to important parts of the truth, the dark parts that are a big part of the puzzle. So I remember it would feel so good if I ever as a child got to experience something dark or tawdry, because it's just there's an imbalance. It's there's this urge, if you're starved of something that's important, then you crave it. And so it was with dark things. It's not that I wanted to embrace darkness. I wanted understanding. I wanted reality. I didn't want to be absorbed in a false reality. And I guess I'll mention this kind of parallels the life of the Buddha. In some ways, I guess, because he was born to this very wealthy family and had this innocent spirit. Maybe it was an INFP, and he was protected from the evils of the world. Supposedly, he was in these paradisical gardens with all of the luxuries of the material world, and when he would walk the streets, they were cleared of beggars and the diseased and the impoverished and things like that. So he was intentionally made to be oblivious. And I said, kind of this moment that I had in childhood where everything was pure happiness, pure bliss, pure spiritual existence in nature with animals and love. Buddha had a moment like that. That was him fishing by the river with his father, and he hadn't thought about it in the way that I did, because I always hold on to that moment through so many abuses and so much pain and sadness that came very soon after that age of 4. But it was much later in life for him that he faced the realities of the world. And he ended up becoming this very extremist, or an extremist, following an attempt at spirituality at the time of, just like extreme austerity, just not indulging, not eating, not drinking, not indulging in any luxuries or even shelter, to the point of sacrificing your health and your body and your strength. And those people believe that if they could detach themselves from the material, physical world and existence, that maybe they could find an enlightenment, elusive enlightenment that was not understood. And for me, I ended up abandoning Christianity later in life because I had a lot of questions and I wasn't allowed to ask questions, and a lot of things didn't make sense, and I was uncomfortable with a lot of it, like being taught that science is this evil conspiracy, when I loved the beauty of nature and loved learning about science that seemed to have such clear evidence and be so sensical and thoroughly checked and balanced. But I did myself, because the real danger of Christianity, and I think the secular and weak-minded, they're kind of immune to this because they don't really have so much of an existence on a deeper level that they're aware of. But for someone like me, like an INFP, who's very conscious of their deeper spiritual existence, it's literally like it's ripping your psyche, your spirit apart, because it creates this cognitive dissonance, which is a psychological term for when you hold two conflicting ideas or beliefs within yourself at the same time. Like, oh, I'm supposed to absolutely believe in God, but there are a lot of unanswered questions at the same time, and your brain, it becomes ill, your spirit becomes ill in that case. Or, oh, I'm taught to feel or believe that this is evil or science is evil, but all of my instincts and my knowledge contradict that, and it's something that destroys some of the deepest, most sensitive, most intelligent people. But most people who are religious they're literally taught to be sheep. So at least in Christianity. And not to question, but even Christ would teach otherwise. That's not the teaching. That's not the real teaching of Christ. I do think that Christ was an enlightened being, and I think religion corrupts those realities. So anyway, I much more consciously, but with a different form of understanding, became very nihilistic once I had gained enough scientific knowledge and other knowledge to absolutely confidently reject that I had that there was truth or certainty to a lot of what I was taught. And it's because that dogma comes as a package, and it's all taught to be a collection of absolute truths that you are to believe, the real thing about Christianity is, you know, if it's like Jenga or something. Like if you pull out one piece, the whole tower falls. The whole thing falls apart because it's all supposed to be absolute truth. Therefore, if any part of it is not true, you can't not trust any of it. You know, so I became, this was like the time of Richard Dawkins. I became like militantly atheist, nihilistic. I had horrible depression, anxiety, chronic pain, and you know, like religion had a lot to do with those abuses that caused that suffering. But it was something that needed to be done. It was a stage that I needed to go through. But so for the Buddha, he spent 6 years in this very austere practice, you know, seeking release from this like spiritual torture and suffering of his worldly existence. And I spent a long time too. But for the Buddha, it was during his meditation under a tree, you know. Sorry if I get any of this incorrect. I guess there are like some details. I find like different readings and documentaries are different about the Buddha's life, but I'm gonna try to be correct. But he was meditating. His body was worn to almost nothing, even though he was, you know, in his 30s. Young, and this woman brought him, I think, like some rice. It was like a kindness, and like sorry, like if I don't get this exact, but like somewhere in there with that, and his remembrance of, you know, this elusive question of, you know, what is true bliss, what is true spiritual happiness and contentment. You know, he recalled this time with his father at the riverbank, where he felt that he remembered it truly happy, and he remembered that it didn't take all of this work and this suffering and austerity. It's something that came very naturally, that flowed very naturally from the world. And for me, like, throughout all of this, I held on to that moment when I was 4 and I was hanging upside down in that tree. It's my favorite tree, and I had the animals and nature, and I was blissfully, perfectly happy. And I remember, you know, even thinking at the time, like, if there is a heaven and I go to it, you know, I hope it's like this. I hope I can be in this like nice young body, and I'm not like these adults who are so messed up, and I can just be purely happy. And I always had that moment, no matter what sort of pain I was going through. It was like a beacon. So it wasn't like a remembrance for me. Like, it was just a question of, how do you get back there once your spirit has been stained or damaged and you are suffering. So I hope that's helpful as an introduction. I think I'm going to stop there. And next time I will explain more, you know, what it means to be pure and innocent and blissfully enlightened, how that can be corrupted and damaged, how we depart from that, why we suffer, and how we return to enlightenment, return to that blissful state once the world has damaged it or destroyed it. So thanks. Please give me feedback, subscribe. I really appreciate the comments that I do get. Like I feel so blessed and humbled when someone says something really nice, or maybe someone's lost and I can help. And I want to connect to people. I want to be corrected or to be of service and create something together. So thank you so much. Namaste or whatever. And I'll continue this soon to talk about attachment, suffering, and enlightenment. Thank you so much. Bye.